Yes, Resident Evil does have a game on the Game Boy Color, and it is Resident Evil Gaiden. This game was released pretty late into the Game Boy's life cycle, even after the Game Boy Advance had launched, and it remains one of the most expensive games for the system. Cartridges range for about $100 to $200 today. And I want to know, is it really worth it? Let's dive in and see what Resident Evil Gaiden is all about. So I recorded this through the GameCube Game Boy player through my RetroTank 2 HDMI, so if it looks a little dark here, that's why. If I own the game, you bet I'm going to play it and not emulate it. The label on mine is a bit worn out, but I did pay less than half of what it goes for, so I still count that as a win. Resident Evil Gaiden was developed by now-defunct British studio M4. They were guided by Shinji Mikami, who served as the game's consultant, and Hiroki Kato, who wrote the game's story. Kato is best known for being the director of Resident Evil Code Veronica, and he did also work on the original Resident Evil with Shinji Mikami. Other than that though, Capcom let M4 do their thing. This is the first game in the series where you get to play as Barry Burton, fan favorite from the first game as Jill's helper, and an overall cool guy. In this entry, Barry is sent by an anti-Umbrella group to find Leon, the rookie cop from Resident Evil 2, who has gone missing. He was last seen on a cruise ship called the Starlight, investigating a loose BOW. Barry arrives with the goal of finding Leon and eliminating the naval threat. It's not really clear when this game is set in the timeline, but I assume it's sometime after Resident Evil 2 and 3. Resident Evil Gaiden takes the Resident Evil formula and takes some major influences to fit it into the handheld experience. Gaiden is played with a top-down perspective as you explore the Starlight. Exploring rooms, gaining keys, items, and backtracking are all here. This game severely lacks puzzles and is instead reduced to just being an item scavenger hunt to progress. Even herbs are here with some new variations. There's no combining them, but you can find purple herbs, which can heal you and cure poison, as well as yellow herbs, which are basically the equivalent of 2 combined green herbs. Red herbs are basically the equivalent of 3 combined green herbs, and the green and blue herbs act as normal for the series. I hope you were keeping notes. Combat is where this game's uniqueness stands out, as it shifts the perspective to a first-person combat view. M4 notes inspiration specifically to the 1987 RPG Dungeon Master, released on the Atari ST. Zombies will shuffle from the background and slowly approach the player, while your aiming reticle will swing back and forth. You attack when the enemy is in range. That sweet spot in the middle deals more damage. The further away the enemy, the less damage and accuracy you will have. The system seems pretty straightforward, and honestly, the knife is actually pretty useful in this game, as I ran into issues running out of ammo frequently. This game also lets you have party members. Later in the game, you can give Leon and Lucia items to hold and use, and switch between using them in battle. I thought this was super cool and made the game feel more like a team effort compared to other classic Resident Evil games. Gone are save rooms of the past, and instead you get set save points throughout the story. Dying in the game lets you continue right where you died, or you can load one of those saves. The Starlight seems like a smaller map. With the added backtracking and respawning enemies, it just feels just right for the Game Boy. I found the later half to be quite difficult because I ran out of ammo, and I definitely recommend avoiding combat any way you can. The alert system that shows in the bottom right of your screen will tell you when an enemy will drop an item, so don't go clearing every zombie you see, because a lot of times it's just not worth it. I gave up a few hours in just because I wasn't careful enough, but I do see myself going back and trying to finish this one. Visually for the Game Boy, it's quite good. There's a lot of detail in the Starlight, and I like how the background of combat changes depending on where you're fighting zombies. The game's soundtrack is pretty limited, but I do kind of dig the title screen music. Resident Evil Gaiden is known for being the black sheep of the series, mostly because the events of the game are not considered part of the canon. For example, the end of the game heavily implies that Leon has been killed and the BOW is taking his place as a shapeshifter. This kind of ruins the lore of future games if the Leon we all know and love is actually an imposter. Despite this, there are a lot of cool ideas here that we see in later Resident Evil entries. The main setting of a cruise ship is one that has been considered by Capcom for quite some time, and showed up later again for Resident Evil Revelations. Gaiden features a new character, Lucia, a mysterious girl who can sense dangerous monsters nearby, and that concept was used again in Revelations 2 for the character Natalia, which also features Barry Burton. Gaiden's impact is indeed noteworthy. Coincidentally, Gaiden was not the first attempt to take the survival horror series to a handheld platform. There was actually a Game Boy Color port of the original game planned, but it was scrapped very late into development. It's surprising how close they tried to recreate the original on Game Boy hardware. You can find almost full, complete walkthroughs online, and honestly, it's very impressive. This is definitely my new favorite version of Jill. Capcom would later try again on handheld platforms with Resident Evil Deadly Silence on the Nintendo DS, which contains a port of Resident Evil 1, but it also features a new campaign mode that adds puzzles that are specifically designed for using the DS and the DS touchscreen. It's honestly very cool if you can find a copy today. As it stands, Resident Evil Gaiden is definitely the most forgotten and overlooked game in the series, but despite that, it isn't as bad as it seems. I'd say play it if you can, but maybe don't try to break the bank for a physical cartridge. And that's Resident Evil Gaiden. Honestly, I'm impressed that I liked this game as much as I did, even if it is a very watered-down version of the classic Resident Evil gameplay design, and it's honestly a shame this isn't really available elsewhere, because it is honestly very impressive for the Game Boy Color. But what did you think? Does this look like something you'd want to play? Let me know, and until next time, take care.